Welcome everyone to this Force Friday. Hope you guys are doing well. End of another work week. Let's say hello to Merton J real quick over here. See how he's doing. How you doing, Merton J?
Hey Mike, doing good.
Yeah.
Are you a doctor or an artist?
Yeah, I know exactly. I could have put anything in there. I guess dentist or an artist, but doctor is the one that we're going to talk about today because we're going to discuss anatomy quite a bit. How's it going in India? What's the weather like there? Is that you still in? You're in monsoon, I think you said right now.
Yeah, it's monsoon, but it's more like going up and down. So sometimes it's super hot, sometimes it's like rainy. Right now it's an unbalance, but I hope it just goes into a balance very soon. Like a full rainy weather, rainy all over. Like
Yeah.
that.
It's interesting because I'm in my own little monsoon in Washington State. It's supposed to have stopped raining by now, but it just keeps going and going and going. I'm worried there's not going to be a summer basically here the way it's moving forward at the moment. I mean, we're closing in on what, the middle of June now? Yeah, middle of June. So we will see what happens. Let's see. So I know you guys out there in the audience are from all over the world, which is super exciting, right? So today's subject is something I'm actually really passionate about, I have to say. It's kind of a line, this whole idea, are you a doctor or an artist, is kind of a sort of little snarky gag of mine when it comes to new students coming in, especially if they have this like really in-depth focus on anatomy drawing, but without really the ability to draw the anatomy. So I want to kind of dig into that more deeply and hopefully really try to make our point in this session about why you don't want to start with anatomy, like why not do that, right? Let's see, Countess says it's raining like crazy this time of year too. Yeah, I have a lot of rain going on here. And like I said, I was here last summer when my house was getting finished, and it was hot and sunny right every day. So it's kind of a weird
So
year.
Michelangelo in the chat, we talk about doctors, and there's Michelangelo.
Exactly. So so let's get to it. I'm going to get us over to Photoshop here. All right. So are you a doctor or an artist, right? Like, why are you drawing anatomy? Especially if you don't know how to draw, right? That's the question. Like, why are we doing that in the first place? There seems to be this culturally artistic addiction around artists, right? Across artists to say, oh my God, I want to learn how to draw. I need to draw anatomy, right? And I think that's a really, really big problem, okay? And that's what we're here to talk about today and figure out why is that a problem in the first place, right? It doesn't seem like it should be an issue, but it is. And again, my joke is, are you studying to be a doctor or are you studying to be an artist? Because sure, doctors might have to go into this and, understand the anatomy, but you don't, not at least at that stage in the game, okay? In fact, you could be an artist and a pretty prolific artist and probably barely know any anatomy, in all honesty. So let's get started. So I was thinking about this last night, and I was like, where do I start this conversation? And I want to talk about the function of things, right? Like how things work. And I started looking up like very simple objects in our day-to-day life. And I was like, I wonder who invented these things, right? So you can see here in the top left corner, we have the invention of the screw, right? 5th century BC. Archytas of Tarentum, right? Of Tarentum, supposedly alleged inventor of the screw, right? What an amazing device, right? If you think about it, what an amazing device. Now that was built off of this, I would imagine. I know this says 1795, and that's really for like a metal nail. I looked this up earlier. The invention of an object that was like a nail or acted like a nail actually goes all the way back to like 3400, 3500 BC. Okay, so way prior, thousands of years before the screw, right? Which makes sense, right? The nail is a lot simpler of an object and its function than a screw is, right? So to me, I know I kind of geek out on this stuff, so hopefully you guys will stick around and follow along with me. But I think about it and I'm like, it's really interesting, right? You have this hard surface, typically wood, right? And people early on, we're talking about 4,000 years ago, realized they could take like a rock, right, that would slowly turn into a hammer, and take a wooden stake and basically push it into, another piece of wood to, like this one, let's say, to connect it to another piece of wood, right? And that helped them build. Prior to this, right, architecture was built more by like notching out the corners of a piece of wood and notching out another one, almost like dovetailing, right? And putting those two pieces together, right? So none of these quote unquote nails or these spikes to build, right? And then that was an evolution, right? They evolved to this step. But man, how clever to then say, you know what, I'm gonna create a tool that looks like this, and I'm going to angle like this down the nail in a way that spins, right? That spins its way down, which really drive this down into the wood through a rotation mechanism, right? So much stronger than the nail, right? So much more secure than a nail is the screw, right? But you got to wonder, like, how did that happen? And I don't know, obviously I wasn't there, but I want you to be aware of the amazingness of this and the function of this, right? And that's where I want to start our whole conversation today. It's like the screw didn't show up out of nowhere, and neither did the nail. Somebody had to come up with the idea of, we're trying to build things. How do we secure them, these pieces of wood, better together, right? And someone, Architas, right, had this genius idea of twisting. I don't know how he got it. I don't know if he saw a tornado or something else happen that allowed him to think about twisting. I don't know if it was with clothing. They used to, and we still do today, right, like twist clothes to wring them out. I don't know where the twisting mechanism came from, but what an amazing invention, right? Kind of leads to the next invention. I started thinking, what else twists, right? Well, the other thing that really twists is the blender. Right, so this supposedly was built in 1922. You could see it was a Polish American named Stephen Poplawski, and I think he owned a company, and ended up realizing he wanted something. I read further about this. He actually wanted something to mix drinks with, like make shakes and stuff like that, right? And came up with the blender. Now, the blades, if the blades were just totally flat, let's say like this, it's okay. It's not going to do the best job. It's really when the blades are diagonal, like so, that you're going to get the best job done, right? Because the spinning is going to force the liquid up or down, just like a fan, like a ceiling fan. A ceiling fan's blades are not perfectly horizontal, right? They're slightly tilted. And that forces the air to go up or down, depending on the rotation relative to the tilt, right? It's all based on physics, right? All physics stuff that I'm discussing here. The point here is that they come from a function. I want to cool off this room. How do I cool it off? In the past, I'm sure you've all seen in like older films, especially let's say in like the Middle East and all, or areas where it's hotter, where fans literally look like hand fans. It's something like this, and the motor just rotates the bar back and forth. And you have these giant fans that go like up and down, or left and right, instead of the spinning, right? It's a little bit more simple, right? A little simpler of a mechanism, right? And that, I'm sure, came from just how we actually fan ourselves, right? But then came the spinning fan, right? And I'll bet that all this stuff basically built off of the idea of the screw, all the way to the blender, to the fan. How do we use this rotation mechanism, right, to support us? There's the wheel, of course. The invention of the wheel is amazing, right? Just the fact that something's round versus faceted is going to let things roll more smoothly. I keep getting a thing on my Instagram of these people pushing this giant boat into the water, and it's the only reason it can even get there is because it's on these giant logs, these trees, right, that have been trimmed down. And because they're round, of course, they can push this massive boat, down into the water, right? So it's function, right? The whole point of this conversation here is function. Function, creates form, right? And that's where I start my argument, right? Function creates form. All these things are about people invented these objects based on a purpose, right? Like, what do I want? I don't want to stand and I don't want to lay down. There's got to be some in-between space, and I don't want to sit there crouched all the time. So the invention of the chair shows up, right? This says supposedly that it was in ancient Egypt that really pushed it, and then it went to the Western world. But imagine a world without chairs, right? I don't know, again, how it started. I don't know if somebody was sitting on a rock and just said, oh, you know what, we should just create furniture that does the same job, right? Seems
Can
pretty
imagine,
straightforward. Say what?
can imagine a world without chairs.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I would guess, again, I wouldn't be shocked if this came from sitting on a rock and maybe the rock got a little bit more sculpted and designed into more of a chair form. And then all of a sudden people started actually developing the furniture itself, right? But if you look at the simplicity of a chair, you know, a chair is built like this, right? There's a reason that it's going to be a certain height from the ground, right? There's a reason it's going to be a certain height from front to back, and a certain reason it's going to be a height from the seat to the back. This is all called ergonomics, for those of you that are interested. Ergonomics is basically the concept of design based on humanity, right? And you know when it's bad because things just don't work right. You're like trying to figure out how the thing works, and it's like uncomfortable to hold or to open or close or whatever it might be to use in some manner. It's not ergonomically designed well, right? Everything, almost pretty much everything on this planet that's man-made is designed to work for us, right, as human beings. So kind of fun to just walk around the world and think about how everything is designed, right? Let me look at this. Does this work? You know, I have food that I ate before here. You know, it's like, here's this tool, this famous tool called the fork, right? It's like, how does this work? Why did this, you know, get designed like this? And we talked about this in the past, the fork, the knife, and the spoon, right? Again, functional tools that have come out of necessity, out of a need. So function, right? And again, the famous line is form follows function, function first. So then why go here? You know, my question for you guys is, this is not where you want to start. These are forms, forms only, right? They're just purely forms. Now, this is out of my anatomy book. And yeah, I have this in my anatomy book. I have to put this in there. I have to, as an anatomy book, I've got to show you a diagram and say, you know, here's these muscles and label these muscles. But the vast majority of the book is based on what are the function of these things, right? So, and that leads us to what most of you know, myself and, you know, now Merton J 4, which is that we teach this idea called force, right? So this is the first step, right? The first step is to understand function, and this whole concept of the force line, which is what you're seeing here, is there to represent how things actually operate, right? If I were to go back to the screw as an example, you know, I could say, well, you know, I might be sitting here trying to figure out how am I going to get something, you know, I want this new tool. It's like, and I have this piece of wood and I come up with the idea. I don't even draw the screw yet. I just say, you know what, maybe like twisting something down into the wood would be better, right? And maybe I start like this. I'm like, I want something that twists down, that'll push it. And then I try it, I make that thing. And it doesn't work really well. Well, why doesn't it work well? Because it doesn't have a point. I look at the current state of affairs for building supplies and they're shaped like this. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The object actually has to be shaped like this, right? And this rotation's got to go around and get smaller and smaller. Why? Because obviously that point has a better opportunity of digging itself into the wood. Now, well, guess what had to have come out of this, right? If you think about it, it's like, okay, well, now I have this thing that turns, right? It's going to go on the piece of wood. What does the head of the screw look like, right? So, you know, most of you probably know about there's flathead screwdrivers and screws. They have a straight line like this, and that's this kind of screwdriver, right? It looks like this. And then there's Phillips, which I didn't dig into, but I wonder if obviously, I would imagine it was named after the inventor, but who knows, right? And there's Phillips, which looks like an X, right? So the head of that screw actually does look like this, right? It's got this like X, this X shape to it. I'm like botching that up, but it's like this, right? So we have these two. Now, which one of these would work better? Definitely number two. Let's call this number two and number one, right? Phillips definitely over flathead. I'm sure both of you have had tried putting screws into wood with both of these. And the problem with the flathead is it's easy to slip out because you're twisting, right? You're twisting, it's easy for that to slide out. When you have two axes locked down like that, that is way more rigid, right? Way stronger. So again, my guess would be from invention standpoint, this probably came first, and this feels like the evolution of the flathead, right? Screwdriver. So all
You're
this
correct,
stuff had to
Mike.
say what?
You're correct, Mike. Actually, I heard myself a lot, like trying to use that first one because
Mm-hmm,
the screwdriver kind of slides off like really
mm-hmm,
easily,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's kind of dangerous.
Yeah,
And yeah,
super dangerous. You know,
pretty tight.
especially if you have your hands next to it or something over here, it's easy for that to slide off, and then you cut your hand, right? You got to be really careful.
Yeah.
So, you know, nowadays they also have like Allen wrench screws. You know, you'll have ones that are like hexagonal, right? You'll have something like this. Sometimes if you go with too many angles, right? Look, we're starting to get closer to a circle. And if I stuck a circle in a circle, well, now there's no corners to grab onto. We'd be twisting and the screw wouldn't be turning. So this isn't so great either. This is probably the strongest thing you could do is two axes, just like that. And that would be enough to take care of the torque, right? So, you know, I keep wanting to inspire you guys to go out in the world and look at it through the filter of function, right? And here's me pitching that idea again, right? I want you to be aware of how things work. Today, when you leave this meeting, you know, and you go to your dishwasher, you go get a bowl of food. It's like, wow, look at the bowl. Look at the depth of the bowl versus the width of the bowl, how much fluid it can hold. Why is it shaped like this? And bowls are of different shapes and sizes. Something as simple as a glass, right? And the shape and size and width of a glass and how much it holds. Imagine a world with no glasses, meaning to drink, right? Like very, very simple day-to-day tools that we take for granted, right? But somebody had to come up with this. Probably started with human beings cupping their hands together would be my guess. Again, in order to drink water from a stream, right? And realizing, oh, I can make a bowl out of that. But it spills easily because it's too wide. What if we make it narrower and taller, right? You can kind of see the process and how these inventions occurred, right? So my point here is force is a tool for you to draw with to understand the function, in our case, of the human body, right? I could use it for other things. I could do a force diagram of a house. I could do a force diagram of a car, of a tree, right? It's like, what are the forces of this thing? Especially if it's man-made too. We could talk about how is this thing designed? How is it working? And literally draw arrows around it. We can look at the drivetrain of a car, right? It's like this thing is spinning to this is going to the wheels, right? Like here's how the brakes work. It's about squeezing down on the disc, let's say, of the wheel, right? It's all physics-based, and we could draw arrows around all this stuff to show how they function. Well, same thing is happening with the figure, right? Just so happens that our body's forces are built in a rhythmic way, right? Which kind of leads me to this, right? It's like, okay, well, we're learning these forces because they're helping our body create balance, right? So here we have like the weight of the upper back versus the stomach and our guts, right? And that starts creating this, right? So all of a sudden, rhythm helps us define this act of counterbalancing, basically, right? Notice I haven't spoken about the anatomy of it yet. It's really just the force of it. And I think one of the toughest things to kind of wrap your head around when we talk about this is when I draw the body, I'm obviously going to draw the body, but my intention is not on drawing the body. My intention is on drawing the forces of the body. And by drawing the forces of the body shows up, right? Like the anatomy shows up purely through the sake of me drawing its energy, right? And that, I know that sounds like a real brain twister. It still does to me today. And I've been saying it for, you know, decades, but I can imagine that hearing that for the first time and going, what are you talking about, right? It's like I draw the energy or turn of the shoulder in order for the shoulder to show up. Of course, it's going to show up because it's what presents that rotation or that turn, but it's that turn that I draw that makes it show up, right? And that leads you to drawings like this, right? This is also, most of the drawings I'm showing you today, by the way, are from the Force Anatomy book, right? So here's a quick, you can see this is a 2-minute drawing, right? Just to also give you a sense of how much you can get done, 2 minutes, right? Full figure drawing from head to toe with all the rhythms in a very short period of time because of where the attention is put, right? And the attention and intention is put on function, which is rhythm and balance, right? We're trying to stay balanced, and we work rhythmically to do so, right? So much there to understand before really getting into the anatomy of things, right? And that's just the function. Now, that function needs to go through space, right? So again, before you actually touch anatomy, you want to get into this perspective, right? Oh, that's cool. Boss says, I'm a medical doctor who recently started. Yeah, well, welcome. It's so awesome that you're here. So, right here we have perspective. You can't create a good drawing without knowing like perspective and construction. It's just not possible. Again, I've tried, I've told you this in the past. I did all my best while I was in school to just try to get around perspective. There's really no way around it. You just got to go through it, you know, and you realize actually once you do start understanding it, just how powerful it actually is, right? And not that difficult once you start really getting the rules. So we want to understand this is 3-point. You know, I teach all the way up to 4-point, but 3-point is for the vast majority what you see, and how you're going to draw different parts of the human body. And once you understand the perspective, then that leads you to having the capacity to draw the forms without the assistance of the grid, right? It'll allow you to drop the crutches, right? The support system, like I said, of the grid lines, and what they're called extension lines that come from the vanishing points, to create forms that look like this. Super important, because on the human body, if you try to draw the head and then the rib cage and pelvis, and you're connecting all these things with force first, all those objects might be moving in different directions. You don't want to sit there and draw a separate grid for every object, right? Because you'd end up with probably like 7 to 10 different 3-point perspective grids to make those objects happen, okay? So you just want to be able to learn how to do this out of your head. And the way to do that is through understanding this guy, right? Is to getting to the grid. So the grid leads to this, being able to freehand draw this. And this is exactly what I take people through on the website, Merton J as well, right? When we do mentorship, and the videos on the website is structured this way, right? So where does this take us? Well, this takes us to gaining an understanding of how line creates form, right? So here I got rid of the turning edges, you know, those lines that really present the corners of the different surfaces of the box on the interior, right? The outside edges are called contours. The inside edges, these guys right here, right, this and this, these are our turning edges. I got rid of that, and you can see the box still holds up because the surface line is doing its job. There's places where surface line is turning a corner and it changes in angle to present that corner, right? So it ends up working, right? And the contour is helping that too, by the way. You'll notice the sharp corner here or here or here. Any of these sharp corners insinuate to our mind, oh, there must be a line there. There's a corner, there's an edge there, right? So you start realizing how like the silhouette and the interior are coming together to make 3-dimensional objects, right? Which leads us to this, right? So now I could start drawing forcefully, right? From the rear end to the top of the thigh to the knee, and then the back of the calf. So rhythm is flowing through here, but I have numerous structures that are being affected by those forces. Again, force first, right? Those forces are the synergy, right? They're the thing that drive through the body that help keep it rhythmic based on its function, but they travel in space, right? They're affecting forms. If you just put a line of force down, it's just floating in space. I have a VR headset, and you know, maybe about a year ago, I think I posted a video, it might even be longer than that, of me drawing in VR. And you put a line out in 3-dimensional space, and it feels so fragile, right? It has barely any girth to it, right? It's just this line floating out in space. So, you know, you turn around it and you just see this line floating. I had to for me to get 3-dimensionality, I had to do like a lot of wrapping to create form to insinuate that there's tubes moving in space, right? Where the body is already massive, it has mass, it has volume, right? So you have to wrap your head around that idea and think, you know, how am I going to get those forms in there, right? Here I'm showing this back and forth of box to box to box, right? So you can see how those two main forms can be used across the entire body to basically tell, for the most part, to be really clear, to tell usually about hard and soft areas. So usually harder areas like the pelvis, are a little more boxy, and the lengths of muscle from joint to joint are a little more tubular, right? So upper thigh, lower leg. You can see the box in the knee, right? So look, I really haven't gotten to anatomy yet, the specificity of anatomy. Even the knee is really just boxed out, okay? I don't know the specifics of the femur and the quadriceps and the tendons that are in here and the patella, right? And the tibia and the fibula and all the muscles of the lower leg, right? Haven't gotten into any of that yet, right? So I want you to be aware again, look how long we're taking here and all the skills it takes to get to a place where you can draw anatomy successfully, right? We talked about function. Here we are talking about form, perspective, right? Structure. Here's some drawings I did for a mentorship session talking about how to use line to present form. So here's some skulls that have been sculpted, right? So here's kind of the beginning of anatomy, right? I do have students go in towards the end of form and take a look at least the human skull, because I know it's going to be really important, right? It's hard to be a pretty good artist, of course, of people and not know how to draw the human head. So the beginning of it is, here's the skull. Notice it's not about the muscles of the skull yet. It's really, I use it more as a vehicle to keep further understanding the box, right? It's like a great object on the human body to do so, right? So that's what this is. And then that leads to the rest of it, right? It's like, here, look at the arm. We could see the turning edge on the arm, how it relates to the box, right? You can see I sculpted down that surface. I left the other surface alone to further clarify that construction. And all these surface lines now start showing movement, or we're kind of pushing into sort of a Frazetta mindset, right? All this stuff is flowing, but showing me sculpture, right, at the same time. See, Boss said, oh, Merton J, very natural for me. How traps, dynamism, stillness really blows my mind. Fortunately, I have experience with anatomical locations, but learning to draw them, yeah, one by one. So this is, again, from the anatomy book. And that leads to, here's a drawing, a little bit of anatomy, not very much, right? Not very much. At this point, you don't even have to know anatomy. You just have to be able to see, and you'll see some of the bumps. Like you might see this curve in here, which is latissimus dorsi, right? But you might see this curve. I might see the thickness and roundness of it. See the thickness and roundness of here. I see the roundness over here on the leg, right? I didn't go in here and decisively separate the architecture and shapes of every muscle, right? Not there yet. So far we've covered function, right, which is basically the force line. And now we have form. So the force of the body is starting to create its construction. Haven't touched anatomy yet. On to the next, the next subject. So you all know I love shape, right? And there's rules behind shape. These are what I call the don'ts, right? The do nots or don'ts of shape. We want to watch out for this asymmetry because it kills fluidity. We talked a lot today about how important rhythm and fluidity is to the figure. So here you can see I'm pushing symmetrically out both sides. Here I'm just going straight up and down, so no asymmetry. And here I'm pushing equally in from both sides, these two concaves, right? So none of these shapes are good. What we're looking for is a shape that's something like this. Now, the reason this is important is the first thing you want to obtain on the figure is you want to see this in silhouette. So when I have students learn this, I have them tone in the figure because I want them to see the shapes of the silhouette. Why? Well, because we make sure that force stays really important. You start learning that shape exists because of form. And as we start making our way towards anatomy, it's like those Russian dolls, right? Like it's like one doll inside of another, inside of another, inside of another. The anatomy is going to fit within the silhouette or boundaries, right, of the body, right? It's not all of a sudden going to like stick out of the silhouette, right? So you want to understand the silhouette in order to know how to fill it, right? For instance, just to give you a quick example, you know, here we have this bump on the arm, right here. Well, that's the deltoid, right? The deltoid comes in here, it's shaped like this, right? I want to be aware of what that shape is that creates that bump. You can see I have it here as well, right? It's like this. So just the contour itself is already starting to imply the construction. And then we're going to dig into that bigger silhouette and figure out what all the anatomy is that's going on inside. Okay, you're welcome, boss. And one of my favorite drawings, this drawing is relatively old. It's been around for quite some time in my life. But this was an amazing model. I believe her name was Abigail, actually. She modeled in New York during the late 90s. And, I show here just shaping of like the fleshiness of her skin and this wrinkle. This is not a muscle, by the way, a specific muscle. This is just the wrinkling of her skin and how it moved and wrapped around her body. That's happening because of some of her anatomy. Like part of it is the edge of her scapular or shoulder blade. But this is just to show I'm looking for shapes, right? This is all shapes. So now the human body is becoming silhouetted. I'm aware of the shapes. What gives me some form are these overlapping moments, right? So for instance, this is a very important overlapping moment. I'm saying the hip is in front of the thigh, right? Really, really important. This side of her rear end, this glute is in front of, let's call this G1 and this is G2, right? How do we know that? That overlap right there actually does it, right? So this is all part of the language of, again, of drawing. Haven't really dealt with anatomy. It's just the language of drawing, how to use line to create force and function, how to use a line to create form, perspective, and structure, how to use line to create shapes that help develop the clarity of those forms and structures, right? Whew, it's a lot, right? A mouthful. So yeah, so look at how much we went through here just to write it out here. Force, which is function. Number 2 was form. Form is 2 things that go on there. The volume of things, which really comes in is developed because of perspective. Then we want to understand shape. Force shape, to be specific. And silhouette is huge here. Such an important subject. And finally, after all of this, right? And that's a lot of curriculum. There's a lot of stuff buried in between all these notes that I'm giving you here. Finally, we can start moving to anatomy. So before I show you some anatomy drawings, if you're someone out there right now who's watching this video and you're trying to learn how to draw and you're stuck and you're drawing diagrams of anatomy, stop. Please stop. Go back to the beginning, right? Step number 1, just get control of line itself, just control line. This is such a very common, traditional, classic line in the world of drawing, the language of art, the skill of art and drawing. And that is coming and moving, pushing down and leaving moving, okay? I didn't make up this mark. What I did is go, what, this mark actually works for force, okay? I can point out comic book illustrations and inkers, for instance, use this from way before I was born, right? We can go back to the Renaissance and find this line way before I was ever born, okay? Right? I'm just the guy that said, oh, you know what? This actually does equal force. And look at how we can use this and look at the system that gets developed out of it. That's who I am, okay? So, use the line, like get accustomed to like creating the line and how that line equals that, right? It's such a big deal. So don't come in, I don't want to scare you off. It's not like don't come in and show me your anatomy drawings. You don't know how to draw. I want to see them, but I guarantee what I'm going to tell you is exactly what Merton J and I are going to be talking about here today, which is, okay, that's great. And I'm going to jokingly say to you, what profession do you want to go into? You want to be a doctor? Because that's kind of what you're focusing on here, right? Is like anatomy and trying to name the anatomy, right? And obviously I usually get, no, I don't want to be a doctor. Why do you ask that? Well, because you're focusing on anatomy, but you don't know how to draw yet, right? So these are all the steps, right? This is what we want to learn before we get to anatomy. By learning all of that first, when you finally get to anatomy, we can talk about the anatomy itself in a more informed conversation. And that's what's going on in these types of drawings. This is from the anatomy book again. You can see talking about the serratus and the obliques on the side of the body, how the rib cage is sitting underneath that, the shape of the lats, the pectoralis pulling over the rib cage to where it's going to meet up with the deltoid, right? I could not have drawn this anatomy without an understanding of all the other subjects that we talked about prior, right? Impossible, just totally impossible. Again, this is from the book. Here I'm talking about the gracilis specifically as a center line. Even when I am talking about anatomy, I'm like, how do I use the anatomy to keep helping inform my drawing, right? So when I look at this, besides being able to name muscles and show where they are, I want to understand how they work, right? So remember, muscles work based on contraction. So anytime you see a muscle, you see like a length of muscle, you got to think this gets shorter. And by getting shorter, it's probably going over a joint, right? That means it's making the bones do something, right? They're opening or closing relative to one another, right? You'll notice the shapes. Look at the shapes that I'm trying to create here, right? Forceful shapes that I'm trying to create, okay? Some places are harder. When something's like a little skinny ribbon, like the sartorius, much more difficult to get a decent shape out of it, right? But these thicker muscles, you could definitely start pushing into forceful shape. Now, what I was going to say is structurally, the anatomy helps a lot because our body, ironically, isn't really broken down too asymmetrically, just enough to like help force push through it. But, I can use the quadricep here, the center quad, as a center line to get me to, to the knee and to the patella, right? The gracilis, right? If I box this out, I could say, here's the turning edge. The gracilis here helps me say, you know what, this is close to like the center of the side of the leg, right? Before I get down to seeing the biceps femoris, or what is called more commonly as the hamstrings, right? So be aware that all this anatomy really helps me understand the function, the construction, right? There's some art teachers out there, and there's some very famous art books out there on how to draw, where the artist's illustrations show anatomy that is under stress, right, is contracted, even though it's impossible for it to be contracted because of what the body's doing. I cannot contract my quadricep, right? Let's say this is the quadricep and the knee. When my shin, here's the other part, when my shin is all the way underneath my leg, right? If I try to bring my heel up towards my rear end, let's say here's the crotch area, right? If my heel is all the way up over here, how am I going to contract that quadricep? It's fully stretched, right? It's fully stretched. I cannot contract it, okay? I'm using my hamstring to get that leg up there, right? This guy is getting contracted to try and shorten, it's shortening and helping pull all this up, but it's not gonna happen here. So that's this level of believability and realism that you bring to your work based on understanding how all this stuff functions, right? So force relative to anatomy, right? But underneath that is the perspective. I needed to know that this guy was built like this in order for me to do this drawing, right? Like here's the box. I drew the box of the leg. Here's the box of the pelvis, right? So all that construction has to happen in there as well. And then the shaping helps me really keep things forceful, even in the silhouettes, and then I can dig into those silhouettes, okay? All right, last but not least, here's my last drawing, and then I'm gonna hand this over to Merton J. This is also out of the Force book, the Force Anatomy book. And it's about, this model was like laying down, pushing down on this arm to help support the body, almost like a push-up, right? And you can see the shape of the anatomy of the upper arm, the lower arm, and the deltoid. You can see the function of it. You can see the shape in the silhouette, and that the anatomy sits inside of the shell of the silhouette, and recognize that the silhouette is in perspective and form. And you can see I'm showing that here. The elbow is further away from us than the wrist is, right? This drawing gives us a sense of the fact that the arm's coming out towards us, right? We're going this way. Oops, there. We're going this way, right? This is further away. This is closer. So this is round. This up here, of course, we're going this way. Right? And the anatomy is showing that. Some of my internal line is showing that. All the overlap is showing that, right? And inside the muscles, like I said, can actually show that, okay? So, like I said, I'm here to passionately tell you, don't start with anatomy, okay? I know there's a lot of artists out there that you see drawing anatomy, but that's because they know how to draw, right? So in order to draw anatomy, you need to know how to draw, right? That's the first component. Learn how to draw, then learn how to draw anatomy. It's like saying, hey, I want to learn how to draw cars. Can't really draw cars until you learn how to draw, right? Especially with something like a car, you need perspective, right? You have to know perspective really, really well in order to draw a car. I want to go draw on location and draw cities and people walking around. that is a huge ask, right? Like that involves perspective, potentially composition, anatomy and drawing people, force, right? Understanding ergonomics, chair and table heights. There's all kinds of stuff that gets involved in that, right? How to do it quickly too, if you're going to draw people in story, you know, in day-to-day life doing their things, right? So before you draw anything, you know, you go onto the YouTube and say how to draw an eyeball, right? That's a really famous video. How to draw an eye, right? You don't want to learn how to draw the eye. You want to learn how to draw. And I guarantee if you learn how to draw, you'll learn how to draw an eye, okay? Then if you want to watch those videos, sure, go watch those videos. Maybe that person's got some little trick of how they they add a metaphor to the eye. Like I love metaphors. Sure, go see if there's any trick there, but at least you know how to draw. You'll be able to follow along, not by copying what they're doing, but by understanding what's actually going on and what they're doing, right? So any how-to thing, be really leery of. It's not going to really mean much of anything outside of you creating an illustrated copy through a step-by-step of what that person did, right? You need to know the other skills, okay? All right, that's the end of my part. I hope that this made sense to you guys. I'll be taking over the chat, so feel free to send me any questions that you may have had about all this. And Merton J, let me get you controls over this. Let's see, there we go. So you can take over share.
Yeah, sure. All right, Mike, thanks for showing those awesome drawings.
Thank you.
All right, so you guys ready to see the back drawings? I think this is like more important because you know what Mike was talking about, like I have an example of that, okay? And I was, yeah, I'm kind of like a teen, you know, who doesn't know like, oh, I just have like passion about this thing. It's like, okay, I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. And that time I actually want to be a fine artist, not an animator, because I really don't know like what the animation is, you know, to be honest. So, you know, I was lucky, and I was lucky like to get in touch with the people who actually, you know, actually, yeah, like consider my talent and say, well, you're better fit, you know, for the entertainment industry. You just I want to become just like a fine artist, you know. But now I can do, you know, it's like learning the fundamentals. It's not just about anatomy, but it's like if you learn the fundamentals, you can apply them anywhere, you know, into like even in the entertainment artist, like we have hundreds of different fields, right? You can apply it there. You can become a fine artist if you want, or anything, right? You can just like apply it to anywhere. So I'm just gonna show you some drawings. So usually, no, before showing you the drawings, I just wanna like tell you something about like my journey. It's like how I actually get into all of this. Okay, so my professor, like he was so passionate about anatomy in the college. Okay, and this was like I'm talking about the first years, like in 2015. Okay, when I get admission into college, and he was really good. He was really good with it and say, oh, you know, muscles, anatomy. He's like super big fan. And you know, one of the reason, by the way, he's actually the reason why I'm here, like sitting here, you know, teaching Mike, because he actually introduced me to force books. So that was a really good part of him. But again, the thing is the function. You know, he might know like all the muscles and everything. You know, and sorry, professor, but he's like the function. The function part is like the missing part. You know, that I want. So let's start with it. So here's some of the drawings. I can see like this is from 2015. You know, this is that was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I was doing something like this. It's like anatomy studies from different books, you know, for sure. And you see, like the reason I bring these drawings is because I am actually studying the functions. You know, functions is like, oh, you know, how this muscle kind of twists, how like the bones are twisting, and so on and so on. It's just that I was not thinking about it. These are just you can call them as copies, not exactly the studies. Okay, and I was told that okay, you just need to like draw that, right? And you can see like my lines aren't that good. I was really not because I'm not thinking about it. You know, we have this quite a famous quote that your drawing is only as good as your ideas. So I was not thinking about it. Okay, I don't have any ideas about. Okay, I need to study function. I need to study the connection of these bones. Let's say, for example, okay, or how these bones actually twist in real life. Yes, we were observing like our own hands and stuff, but yeah, it's just about the environment. That you are going into. So these are like copies, okay, not studies. Okay, there's a difference, guys. Again,
I have
see,
to say, talking about doctors really quick, even if a doctor doesn't know how to draw well, it would be amazing for them to have the opportunity to actually do this, to draw anatomy, because I find when I draw something, I learn it better, right? I remember it better because I had to really like focus on it and think. So if
yeah,
you were purely there to just learn like muscles attached from this bone to this bone, that's great, right? Is that teaching how to draw? No, and it might not even be a great drawing. It'll be like this diagram. But for that, it would be fine, right? It's like, okay, I have a diagram of this connecting from here to here. It's not going to teach you how to draw, right? Again, to do it well means all the stuff that we talked about. These are great. I love that you brought these in, Merton J. It's awesome to see. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like I see a lot of this come in and not drawn at the skill level either. And I'm like, wow, why are you doing this, right? You still need to learn how to draw before you even get here.
yeah, sure. And that's why I bring this up is like, but you're gonna see the consequences of it, because I was just like copying these, although they might look, oh, I was studying function, but I'm not aware of it. Okay, and I can see the consequences of it. I'm just gonna bring that. Now this is the doctor level stuff again. Now I'm not saying that, oh, you should not be like studying every muscle or something like that, something like that. But it's like, let's say you don't want to learn that what that vein actually does, and like what is the composition of it, and like what it is made up of, and those kind of things, especially when you're at the beginning. Okay, like nobody's stopping you from learning all those things, and you can just like go in there if you're like super passionate lad about anatomy. But it's like, how are you going to show that, right? How are you going to show that you're drawing? And far more importantly than that is, if you're able to communicate. Okay, I always teach in mentorships, like especially in the beginning, especially in the basics. My basics are, like I'm known for like teaching students in basics. So one of the things to teach in the basics is, the drawing is a language. Okay, like the drawing that we do is a language. From the old like cave paintings and cave drawings to this day, right? The meaning of the drawing hasn't changed yet. Okay, it is used for communication because they don't have language like the monkeys that we used to be, and it's still not changed, right? We are communicating with this language. It's just that it's not a written language. Okay, it's a visual language. Okay, and the line basically is the vocabulary of this language. Okay, so your line actually decides if you're able to communicate very well. Okay, and that's why I'm just like super focused. I'm a line lover. Okay, I really love lines. I just like to play sensitive with it. It's like, okay, are you sensitive about are you sensitive about the pose, where the model is like feeling the strain or the pressure, right? Where they're feeling relaxed, like all those kind of things. So this is much more exciting to me, by the way. Just to like sum it up all together, is that is much more exciting to me. Is like, how do I do that? Rather than just oh, this bone connects to this or this bone connects to that. Again, not saying that this is not important, but not in the beginning. Okay, so there we go. Like I was like doing these muscles and like using this muscle study, but look how stiff they are. Okay, like, okay, I was knowing all the traps and everything, but it just looks flat. Okay, it's having like no function at all. This kind of thing you see, like I'm drawing the abdomen in 2D, even though we are looking at from the profile shot. So kind of like that. Again, the same thing, very, very stiff. Yeah, here we are studying like the muscles in a neutral position. But even though, if today I will have to like do this kind of study where this like person is standing and just like doing the muscle on top of it, it would still be very dynamic because I would know the function of the muscles, a little bit. This would be a lot better, if I draw it today. Yeah, see, again, like a lot of function. I was studying a lot of function, like even like the bones, like a stretch and a squash. There's like the bean in here. That was a neutral guy, spine, right? So I just like quickly grab some. Now here, what I was doing after that, this is around 2016 or something like that. So 2016 or 17. Much more detail. Right? Now this is actually what I would consider like a doctor level stuff. It kind of, I was trying to study every vein, right? Like every vein and every artery and like those kind of things, and see like making a lot of notes in there, right? People usually ask me is like when trying to like say, whoa, we don't want to get to the rendering and lighting and at the beginning. Some people were like, oh, do you actually have done these things? And I was like, yes. Here we are. I'm just a little bit more classically trained in the beginning, and then I actually jumped to this. So I have like both kind of experiences, like this. But again, doesn't really this stuff, right, doesn't really help me tell my stories. Okay. So with this stuff, what I can do is I can see a human, okay, or I can see a photograph, which means reference is mandatory, and I can pinpoint out, yes, this is that muscle, this is example muscle, this is that bone, this is that bump or whatever. It's just that if someone would say, yes, now draw that from imagination, then I would just be like looking here and there, right, nodding my head. So I was like, yes, this isn't even allowing me to tell what I want to express, what is the story of this pose or like things like that. Okay, this is where artists get stuck. Okay, you're stuck to the references. You can pinpoint out every muscle and every bone, um, every bump and crevice on the body itself, but it's like, what does it help you? Why are why you don't want to grow? Like, don't you want to tell your own stories to the viewers, right? Those kind of things. Again, I'm just gonna skim through it. Like, these are all the kind of same studies. Again, I'm looking for the proportions and stuff. Like that. Those kind of things. Yeah. Again, this, let me tell you, even in this time, I was not aware of the function. Okay, I'm just like now this is more like a study and a copy, like somewhere in the middle. I was growing a little bit more. I was trying to understand like things a little bit more and more, and I was practicing from the first book, so I was a little bit more aware of the function of it. And you can see these are like better drawings. I have better control over my line quality. Leave the shading apart, like leave all the cross hatching apart, but the structure is better, finally. And this what finally leads me to like the full rendering process. Now you'll see it right here. Um, Again, what does it improve? It improves my lighting sense. It improves my shading or rendering skills. No function at all. Still, okay. So now there we go. Right now, we are working on this like clothing project, which I cannot tell you too much about. But this is so again, like looking back at this drawing, which is from years ago, I was not really thinking about the fold type or how actually the fold actually hangs. I was not even aware about the gravity. But this drawing might look very cool, to you guys, but it's just that, let me tell you, it's like so enjoyable when you actually know about the function, when you actually think about the practical use of it, and then you're drawing it. Okay, and if then your drawing, you know, works. Even if it's rough, you can have it can have that sense, right? That you're like aware of the working of it, right? So we have a little bit more here. You can see like, okay, good rendering, but see that hand right there? It doesn't really connect to the shoulder, and it's like, oh, how long is that? How long is that upper arm? Is it that long, right? And this
Yeah,
arm's
zoom in
like,
on that hand. Let's take a look at it.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it doesn't look like it's really holding on to the baby's shoulder, right? It's just kind of placed there. And you could see the anatomy. You could see that you went into the bones of the hand, but it's functionally not really doing anything, and it's not really hooked up to the wrist, right, rhythmically.
Yeah, it's like this, and is it that long, right? The upper arm is that long, is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
forearm is short, and look at the size of the hand, right? So many like these are mistakes, but the beginning artists, would go to the looks of it, like would judge it based on the looks of it. It's like, oh, that's awesome. And I've seen like people say about this drawings, like, oh, that's really good, and so on and so on. Not at all, right? Because fundamentally it's not good. You see, like the baby head is a little bit smaller as well. All right, we have more. Yeah, so like some like skull drawing here and there. Let me tell you. So when I do this kind of study, I would expect myself to learn about it, okay, to learn about the structure of it, so I can create the skull in whatever angle that I want in future, okay. But it doesn't help me, okay. The quick studies that I'm doing right now, that actually helps me a lot. Okay, quick studies means, for example, something like this. So I'll keep this drawing in here. I'm gonna say, so for example, the structure is more like this. It's kind of like ball head in here, I remember, and it's more like this kind of structure to it. Okay. So let's say like the most basic shape of it is more like this. The very basic shape of it is like more like this. Okay. Now, once I understand this structure, okay, now I can go in and say, I want to draw the skull from bottom, okay, like a bottom 3/4 view. I'm just gonna, if I know about the structure, I can do that, right? Like, oh, it's more like this, it's more like this, it's more like that, right? So right now I'm not doing a proper study of it, but I'm just like saying things. It's like this is how I study right now. Okay. Now if it's about skull, obviously skull is like kind of hard. It's less gestural, like more structure. So you would use like more structure for it. But let's say for example a human. Okay. I want to say, okay, I want to draw a human from the top view. Okay. I'm just gonna quickly like do these rhythms. Say, oh, here it is. Right there. We are looking at this heavy person from this like top view, okay, more like this. So whatever. What I'm trying to say here is fundamentally is you want to become like a strong person, okay. Fundamentally is again function. Why you're drawing that thing. It's going to be a human. It's going to be that pose that you're drawing. How that's how that pose is actually functioning. When we are teaching, especially in my mentorship, I was like, you don't want to learn how to draw that pose. We are not making you trade on that pose again and again. We are not teaching you how to draw that particular pose. We're just trying to teach you that how that pose is actually functioning, okay? So that when you understand it, you can actually go in future and say, oh, I've done that pose. I know how it works. Let me just, build something out of that in a snap. All right. I'll just see a little bit more. So I'm trying to like bring those studies in here, as you can see. Holistically, just I would say this torso feels like this still. I were to like do it today, I was like, yes, it's like, oh, rendering is everything is okay, but I don't feel like that. What do you say? Like the flexibility of a real human while in that drawing. Okay, yeah, it might be like this. Might be like in the reference. I don't remember like where that I draw it from. It might be like that in the reference, but now I'm not just an artist. I just also like love to be a designer. Okay, designer means I can change things around if I wanted to. I can change things which I don't like and exaggerate the things which I like about that particular pose or the reference that I'm drawing. Okay, so if I were to like do this today, I would have just drawn a better flexible human. Like, oh, this might be a little bit bend in here, might be a little bit squash in here, just to show the functioning of those muscles. Okay, right now the muscles are not doing anything, just stiff, right? Stiff straight up. Again, the eye thing Mike was actually mentioning about. So here, like in this stage, I'm becoming good at drawing. Okay, that's why that's why I'm able to like do these renderings and stuff. You can see like this eye kind of looks very realistic. Okay, so I was like learning how to draw, but I was becoming better at drawing. But it's that functioning thing, that took me like years to actually get into my head. It's like whatever you do, man, try to think about the function first. All right, let's see some couple more. Let's see, here's a hand again. This is anatomy studies. All right, so there we go. It's key. As you can see, one example is sitting in front of you. I'm just gonna say in the end, for my part is learn to draw, right? Like Mike is gonna actually end up the stream, but from my side, I'm just gonna say like learn to draw first, like before learning the subjects, okay? Like the particular subjects. Anatomy is one of it. Anatomy is a subject, and the muscles actually sit on top of the structure itself. Okay, so imagine if there's no bones, we're just like a squishy, squashy ball, right? Of like mass of muscle. So just need to like get from the inside out. Okay, get from the inside out, learn how those functions, and yeah, hope you like, hope you enjoyed some like small journey through my drawing, drawing journey. All right, thanks for watching, and I'm just gonna hand it over to Mike for to
Yeah,
conclude
thank
this.
you, Merton J.
Yeah, very
A
welcome.
lot of good questions were floating around there
Mhm.
in the chat that I tried to wrangle.
Yeah,
I wanted to close, well, two things. First of all, someone had said, that it's really interesting to see our evolution. I mean, it's amazing to see, Merton J's like anatomy drawings and how he draws now, right, with this other purpose, right? It's basically based on what you're thinking about, and what your purpose is what your artwork looks like, right? But in closing, I have a simpler thing I want to talk about, and that is, I just started this only recently with having any kind of sale for mentorship. We had our first sale only last December ever, right? Ever any kind of sale on mentorship. And we just started putting ads out that we're having a summer mentorship sale. So the coupon code is summer mentorship, no spaces, summer mentorship. This is for new students only, meaning new students of mentorship. If you're someone who's a premium member and you're here today and you're interested in mentorship, here's a great opportunity to get in, okay? It's $400 off, okay? It's pretty amazing, right? 400 bucks off. So if there's, if you have an interest to do it, now's the time to do it. I think the sale goes on for maybe another 2 weeks or so. Now's a great time, right? I don't know if I'm ever going to do another sale again or not. We'll see. But right now, I'm going to do it for the summer. I'm trying to keep costs low. We all know that, especially in the US, we're dealing with a lot of crazy inflation. Also, like the price of everything is going up. So I'm trying to put this out there as an opportunity for you guys to get in if you want to learn one-on-one with Force instructors. I'll try to remember to bring this up every week. Like I said, it's only going on for a few weeks. So yeah, sign up. The earlier you sign up, the better shot you have of getting in quicker with one of us instructors. What happens the last time we did a sale is it also really started building up a queue list, a wait list. So if you're interested and you want to get started pretty quickly, sign on. Otherwise, if you sign in by the second or third week, I can promise you there's probably going to be a little bit of a wait. You might have to wait like a month or a month and a half or something to get in. Okay. And even if you sign up now and you don't want to start now, but you sign in under the coupon and you say, you know what, I want to sign up, but I'm not going to start till like September, that's fine. All right. So summer mentorship, go check it out. It's for only the 12 session, by the way. Only for the 12 sessions, not for the 36. It's not for the single one-off sessions. It's for the 12 session group. New students, meaning if you're new to mentorship, you could be a basic or a premium and you're still interested in bumping up. That's fine as well. So you have to be a new student. It's for the 12 session package. Summer mentorship is the coupon code and it's 400 bucks off. All right. So hopefully I'll be seeing some of you in mentorship, okay, for the summer. Otherwise, thank you again, Merton J. The goal Merton J and I are leaving you with today is if you want to learn how to draw, don't go to anatomy, right? Learn the skills of drawing, right? And we believe that those skills are force, form, and shape first, right? Force, which is function, fluidity and rhythm. It's the glue of the human body. Form and perspective to give you structure, right? Solidity and space and mass. Shape to understand how silhouette is going to have those forces, and how those shapes are created from those forms. And then finally, we can start talking about anatomy. Okay. All right, everyone, have a great weekend and a great week next week. We will see you next Friday. I think Swenley will be returning as well. So we'll be with Swenley also. All right.
Yeah,
take care, everyone. Yeah, I'll see you, Merton J. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right.